Well, hello, hello, hello. Today's video is going to be an educational video on math. Okay. Actually, it's going to be hopefully a piece of advice, sharing my experience, and hopefully helping you to potentially save money in the long run with the cost of things. Okay, so I learned recently from someone that there are these things called gas. When you buy those storage bins that you get from like Wally World or Target or probably Big Lots and things like that. That you can buy the storage bins, and there are some that are made better than others, right? So some of them have little crappy little clips on the side, and they just kind of click down over it, but they have absolutely no sturdiness to the lid staying on. So the plastic is thinner, and as you kind of if you lift it and there's too much weight in it, if it's not light stuff, then the lid, as the plastic bends, these clips that are so small that are already holding it on will kind of click off, and the lid will become loose, and then you're like, oh man, the lid's loose and things are going to fall everywhere. So in a lot of cases, I'm using those, but what I'm doing with them is I'm putting the lids on, and then I'm shrink wrapping them. Right, so I tape the lid on first, and then I shrink wrap the lid to make sure that it's not going to. I shrink wrap the whole body with the lid in on it so that it won't come apart. And that's making sure that these items don't come out and fall everywhere, because that would be an effing nightmare. Well, actually, I'll show you something real quickly here. Um, so this right here, as you can see, are these like bright pink little labels. See those? I can see them right there. But they're these little bright pink labels. So these are the ones I'm going to put on my roommate's boxes, because this is going to be her room. So I have some blue ones. And so these come in sheets of 10. Okay, so they come in 10 sheets, and then they're larger labels. They're more like name tag size labels. But what I've done is I've folded them in half on both of them. So now 10 becomes 20, because I don't need huge lots of space. I just need it as a tag so I can show people, so I can direct the movers saying, okay, everything that's got a pink label on it, put it in this room. So that's the goal, is to put labels on there so people know, the movers know where to move things, and we're not having to go through all that business on Friday after we get there. So anyways, getting back to what I was talking about. So you've got the ones that are kind of cheaper, the cheaper plastic. You can tell because the plastic kind of bends more as you're doing stuff. It bends more as you're, put any substantial weight in it. And so that was a nightmare, because I was ordering some of these from Walmart. And I know it's kind of weird that I learned at this point in my life and not before. But we were having a conversation at dinner with some people couple of weeks ago. And I think I mentioned this in a video. Sarah, she happened to mention that she gets the Sterilite gaskets. And I was like, I don't understand what that means. And she was saying that the gaskets are the ones that have the clip-on hand, have the actual clips, the little clip-on handles type things. So in other words, instead of the little tiny little clip that just slips over the top and kind of hooks into place, this actually has like a little flap that kind of clips on top of it to keep the lid on. So instead of it being the clip being on the lid, it's actually on the body. So you sit the lid down on top of the body, and then you have these clips that can either be on either side of the length, or sometimes there's two of them on each side of the width. So let me see if I can describe this better. So if the frame is, if the body of the storage bin is longer, okay, and then it's not as deep. So it's wide but not deep. So on the wide side, they will have like two clips on either side. And on the depth side, they'll just have one clip. But they clip from the body of the storage bin over the lid to keep the lid on and keep it more secure. And then they still have handles on the side, usually underneath where those clips are. if it's on the depth side. Okay, so here's how you should remember bins. When you buy bins, and this is something I'm learning, not like I'm a master of it, I'm learning this all as I continue to go. But you've got width times depth times height. So the width is when you sit it in front of you and you're looking at like where the tag would be on the usually where the tag is on the bin. It's on the width side, so it's across the longest part of the side, longest part of the bin. And then if you turn it sideways, it's usually more narrow, and that's the depth, meaning how deep it goes across. And then there's the height, which is what it's like from the bottom of the bin to where the top of the bin is. So it's usually width times depth times height. Okay. So, anyways, when you get the ones that have gaskets, they actually the plastic is usually more solid. It doesn't break as easily. And the lids definitely don't come off as easily because those clips are solid on there. Sometimes if you can get some good ones that have the clasps on them, you also can find that they have little tiny holes usually on the depth side of the frame, and those holes you could either put like a little lock on, or if it's wide enough, it's a little more of a kind of a slit. You can slide like tape or rope through it to tie it off to further secure the lid onto the body of the bin. So look for ones that say gasket on them. If you're looking for good storage bins, look for ones that say gasket. Gaskit. Kit. Is that a word? Kit. Kit. So gaskit. Look for bins like that when you're shopping. If you don't want to end up getting those cheaper bins, they're going to cost you, they'll be cheaper, but as far as like the sturdiness of them, the manufacturing quality, you get what you pay for, basically. You get a $5 bin, but if it's a cheap $5 bin and the lid won't stay on, then what was the point of the cheap $5 bin? So here's the next thing I've been learning about these things. So they do this intentionally. It's a part of an advertising thing, and it makes you think it's more than it really is. Okay, so whenever you buy storage bins, they like to use the word quarts when they're describing the bin, right? So they'll say 27 quarts or 54 quarts or 80 quarts or whatever else. So remember that that's not gallons, it's quarts. So what you have to do is start doing the math. So there's 4 quarts in a gallon. So if you really want to know how many gallons of space you have in a storage bin when you're buying them, especially online, if you're not tactually touching them and looking at them, you've got the right ones, the ones with the gaskets. But if you don't know what they look like because you're not physically touching them, you have to start thinking about it in perspective of gallons. Okay, so when you're gonna get one of these gasket bins, if it says like 27 quarts, okay, so I bought some that said 27 quarts. So how many gallons is that? So I'm going to divide 4 into 27. Well, 7 times 4 is 28. So I know it's not quite 7 gallons. So it's going to be 6 3/4 gallons. So that's not huge. So just imagine a gallon of milk and pouring it over a large surface area. So what you're going to have is you're going to have a bin that may have a lot of width and a lot of depth, but it's going to have virtually no height. So it's going to be kind of a flat, kind of a smaller flat thing. Okay, it's going to be more like probably, it might be 10 inches high, but it's not going to, if you're lucky, it's 10 inches high. It'll probably be a little less than that because the width and the depth are going to take up most of the space, the surface space, and then, that height is going to be smaller. So I found some of those for $7.28 a piece on Walmart. Okay, so basically $7.28 a piece. So if you divide that, if you do, you're paying basically $1 per gallon. Okay, so it's a little less, but you're a little more actually, but basically $1 per gallon. So $7.28, and it's 27 quarts. So that's 27 quarts equates to 6.75, 6 3/4 gallons. So then I already had some that were 54 quarts, which is basically two of those. So uh, you know that 54 quarts is going to be basically 13 and a half gallons. Okay. So it's going to be a 13 and a half gallon bin. So it's now going to have more height. It's going to have this usually the same width and the same depth, but the height's going to be taller. So probably about twice as high. So it might be more like, I don't know, it might be between 12 and 14 inches tall. So it's going to be a little taller. And then it's going, but it's all about how that that is dispersed. That 13 and a half gallons is dispersed. But the one that's 13 and a half gallons is 58 for a 4-pack. So if you take that down, it's $16.50 per bin. Okay. So it's $16.50 per bin, which means if I was going to equate it to that 27 quart, which is 728, that was 728. This one 54 and it's 16 and a half. That means that it's basically if I took the two of the 27 quarts and put them together, that would make for and took them by price, which is for 728 a piece. That would be 14.56 versus buying them at $16.50 a piece. You're now seeing that there's $2 more for each bin. Okay, and I'm getting less. I'm getting less space as far as price comparison is concerned, right? Because I'm paying basically $1 per gallon, a little more than $1 per gallon for the 27 quart, but I'm actually paying more like $1. Let's see. Let's do some math with the A lady. So computer, what is 7.28 divided by 27?
7.28 divided by 27 is approximately 0.2696.
So let's just basically say I'm paying 27 cents per quart on the 27 quart one. So 27 cents per quart on the 27 quart bins. So let's take I know it's $16.50 for a 54 quart. So computer, what is 16.5 divided by 54? Computer, what is 16.5 divided by 54?
16.5 divided by 54 is approximately 0.3056.
So basically 31 cents. So now instead of paying 27 cents per quart, I'm now paying 31 cents per quart. And I'm getting twice, I'm basically added 4 cents per quart in price. So now I then found some, I thought they were going to be bigger because, I'm looking at them online. Some 80 quart ones. Okay. So now 80 quarts. So what are you going to get? About the same width, about the same depth, but you're going to have that much more height. Okay. So now I had 6 3/4 gallons on the 728 priced ones. I had 54 quarts, which is basically 13 and a half gallons on the $16.50 ones. And now I've got the 80 quarts. Well, 80 quarts is 20 gallons, right? So 20 gallons, and they were $97.50 a piece, basically. So 97 divided, because it comes in a 4-pack, so I'm going to divide it by 4. So that's going to come out to 26.35. No, wait, make sure. 24.35 per unit. So 24.35 for an 80 gallon or an 80 quart storage bin. So computer, what is 24.35 divided by 80?
24.35 divided by 80 is approximately 0.3044.
So making sure I'm doing that correct in my head. 97. Yeah. So the 80 gallons for a 4-pack, they're coming out to just under 31 cents. So I rounded up on the previous one because it was 0.305. This says it's 0.304. I want to make sure I'm doing this correct. Computer, what is 97.5 divided by 4?
97.5 divided by 4 is 24.375.
Okay, 24.375. So 2438. So let's do it this way. Let's do it differently because my math was off there. So computer, what is 24.38 divided by 80?
24.38 divided by 80 is approximately 0.3048.
Okay, so it's still a little less. So, but you'll notice that, so the first one, which was 6 and 3/4 gallons, was 7.28, which basically was 27 cents per quart. The second one, which was a 54 quart, was $16.50 per unit, and which was basically 31 cents, 0.305, but it's basically 31 cents per quart. And then I jump over to the 80 quart, and that's 0.3, and then that was 24.38 per unit. And then if you divide that out by 80, it gets to be about 0.3048, but basically it's 31 cents. But it's just a touch less than the 54 quart per quart, just a touch less in price. So you start to see when you're looking at prices, you want to kind of see where you're getting a deal and where they're selling you on making it looks bigger. So that's why they justify the higher price. But we're talking about it jumped up by $2 per unit when I went from 27 to 54. So it jumped up for $2 per unit. Now, it doesn't seem like that much when you divide it out by quart, but it's still $2 per unit. And if you are trying to save money, what is the best way to potentially save some of that money? Is to potentially do like shrink wrap, potentially use some tape to tape around the bin to keep the lid on more. That's an option. I would suggest that you do shrink wrap if you can around bins. I do that just especially with ones that don't have good sturdy lid connectors because I just know they're going to fall everywhere otherwise. So just as a kind of a recap and thinking about, I know that not everybody's math oriented, but think of it this way. So first thing you need to do is find out how many quarts it is, okay? Sometimes they'll tell you gallons, but most of the time it's quarts. So if they tell you quarts, the first thing you have to do is how many gallons is that? So 4 quarts in a gallon. So divide the number of quarts by 4, and you'll get the number of gallons. So if it's, in this case, there was one that was 54, I divide 54 by 4, and I get 13.5. So that means 13.5 gallons, so 13.5 gallons. Then if you buy them in a package where there's like 4 of them, you have to then separate the price. So for example, it was $58 for 4 of those 54 quart ones. So I've got to take the price, which was $58, and divide it by the number of units, which is 4. So I've got 4 into 58 goes 1, and then 4, and then 0.5. So it's, let me see if I'm sure I'm correct. When I did math, maybe I did math wrong before. I might have done math wrong before. Computer, what is 58 divided by 4?
58 divided by 4 is 14.5.
Okay, 14.5. So I was actually wrong. So it's still more expensive per unit, but it's not as much as I thought it was. I thought it was $16.50. It's actually $14.50 per unit. So now I've got $14.50 for a 54 quart bin. And now you have an idea of what you're spending on them. So first one was 6 and 3/4 per unit for the 27 quart. So a 27 quart is 6.75 gallons, and that was $7.28. the 54 quart I bought, these are Sterilite gasket bins, by the way, I'm talking about in this case. Then you have the 54, which is 54 equates to 13 and a half gallons. So twice the first one. So 54 quarts is 13.5 gallons per unit on the 54 quart ones, bins, and those are $14.50 a piece. And then on the 80 quart ones, it's 80 quarts, which is 20 gallons. And if you and there's four of them in the group, which is $97.50 a piece. So you divide that out, and it's 24.38 per unit. And then you divide that, and you find out it's basically 31 cents. So it's not a huge difference, but if you are kind of counting change and trying to get the most out of the bins, just consider. So when I actually look at it, when I fix my little numbers here, it's a little odd here. I'm doing math here, so 728. Computer, what is 7.28 divided by 27?
7.28 divided by 27 is approximately 0.2696.
0.26. Yeah, so that was 27 cents per ounce. Yeah, so it's basically 27 cents per quart, and the other one was 31. So I'm just gonna do the formula one more time. I know this is a little confusing, especially for people who aren't ridiculously into math. But when you buy a bin, get the quart count. That'll tell you a lot about how much space you're gonna actually have in it. So it says quarts divided by 4, because that's how many quarts are in a gallon, and you'll find out how many actual gallons you have. And then if you want to get the price per quart, find out what the price is per unit. So if it's 728 for like the one I just talked about, divide 728 by the number of quarts, which is 27, and you'll come out to that basically 27 cents a piece per quart. And do that with all of them. You can kind of figure out what the number is, what the price is going to be for your storage bins. And some of them are going to be better than others. So I know that when we were getting some for Marie at Target, they were 36 quarts, and they were $16 a piece. Now, I haven't done the math on this one before, but so I know 36 quarts is actually 19 gallons. Because let's see, 36 quarts. Let's see, let me make sure I'm doing this. Oh no, it wasn't 36. It was 76 quarts. So 76 quarts, and if I divide 76 by 4, I get 19 gallons. So it's 19 gallons. And they were $16.50. They were $16 a piece, as I recall. So let's do it by the quart. So, computer, what is 16 divided by 76?
16 divided by 76 is approximately 0.2105.
So hers were larger bins, and they were 19 gallons, and they were $16 a piece. So she basically got them for about 21 cents per quart, versus me paying a little more than that. So I will say that the Sterilite offers you the one that we got for her was not Sterilite, but it did have that little and it didn't have clip handles on the width of the bin, which was the longest part of it. It had them on the depth side. So there was only 2 handles and 2 clips, which makes the lid a little bit more malleable in the middle, which means if there's too much weight in it, the lid can kind of bow up or whatever as you're lifting it, as the body kind of bows a little bit based on the weight inside of the bin. But it did have those little slits on the side where you could put tape or rope through to kind of secure the lid on more. So those were good, but they were not clear. So I couldn't see what was in the bin. Like with these, I can see what's in the bin. I can see it's toilet paper in the bin if there is, and I just filled up one that was pretty much just toilet paper. Um, there was, if there's electronics or kitchen gadgets or whatever, if you can't see, then it doesn't matter. But it does make it, if you have someone assisting you, they can see into these Sterilite ones. Whereas the other ones, you'd have to know what was written on what was in the bin. You'd have to mark it with a friend pen yourself or some kind of an audio labeler or braille or whatever to know what was in it. Or someone would have to, or you'd have to open it up and look inside of it. Just every time you wanted to find out what was in the bin. So there is a benefit to having the clear ones. So you're paying that extra money, but you are getting a little bit more visibility of what the items are in it. And that can be a benefit. So just consider all the things when you're trying to buy something. What's your budget? Uh, I don't like boxes in the long term because they collect a lot of dust. And that just invites creatures and all kinds of stuff. It's not as secure. It invites creatures. They can smell things more in boxes. Boxes are burrowing things. They use those materials to create their nests and things like that for rodents. So just be aware of that kind of stuff when you're buying. You're using boxes for moves. Sometimes you have to, price wise, it's less expensive, and sometimes it's easier to find free boxes. Although boxes are ridiculous now. Sometimes you buy a box and it's like $8, depending on where you're going to buy a box. You'd be better off buying a plastic bin because it's plastic bins reusable. Once you tear open that box and all that, it's pretty much gone. So bins can be more reliable and a little more secure. So that's my little rant about storage for today. Just remember, you know, when you're doing it, the equation would be to find out how much you're paying per quart and per unit. First off, find how many quarts there are. Okay, in the storage bin, it'll usually say quarts. If it says gallons, you're even better off. But if it says quarts, divide the number of quarts by 4, and you'll get the number of actual gallons. Find out what the price is per unit, so 728 or whatever the number may be, and then divide the unit price, which means the bin price, by the number of quarts in it, and you'll get a price per quart. Okay. Now you could do that by gallons as well. It's just up to you which one's better for you. You could get an idea of the price difference according to what your standards are. But then you can kind of figure out what you're paying. And for example, Marie got a better deal because she had 76 quarts and she was paying $16 for basically 19-gallon bins, but they were not opaque. You couldn't see through them. You'd have to either have labeled it or, and which is always encouraged when you're sight impaired or blind, is label something with an audio label or braille or something like that, so you know what you're dealing with. But you either have to label it, or you'd have to open the lid and look inside of it. Versus with like the Sterilite, if someone's sighted is assisting you, they can look and say, "Oh, looks like that only has just toilet paper," or "Looks like that has some of your kitchen stuff in it." So there are benefits to it. You do pay more for something like that, but it can add a benefit and a convenience for your life. So just keep those in mind and try to get bins. I really encourage you to avoid the hassle and the nightmares that go along. Don't buy the cheap ones just because they're cheaper. Get ones that have gasket clips on them because they kind of it's almost like airlock type of thing, but the real idea is it clips it in solidly so that it won't move. Okay, you can still get air in there if you really want to get air in there, but it's less. Okay, so gaskets are the ones that have the clips either on the width or on the depth, and the clips are built into the body. And when you put the lid on top, you push these clips up and it snaps on and it holds the lid in place. Versus the cheaper ones, there's a little clip on the lid, and when you sit it on top of the bin, there are these little grooves on the sides of the bin that the clips go into, but they're not as sturdy and they're not going to last as easily. And if you pick up something that's heavy, the bin's going to bow and the lid's going to start popping off because it's just the way it's designed. You can secure it by using tape more to keep the lid on better, or you can shrink wrap it, which is what I did with some of those bins like that. But just be aware, you get what you pay for, and you want to make sure you have the highest quality possible and try to stay away from boxes if you can, and use bins, because you never know. If you're not planning on ever moving again, then great. But if you know you'll be moving again, you want to keep those good bins around so you can pack your stuff up and don't have to keep paying for that stuff over and over again. And bins stack, which is the best part too. They stack, and so it's easy storage. All right, take care of yourself. God bless. Be safe. Spend quality time with your family. Don't be a math nerd like me all the time, but hopefully this helps you in some kind of small way if you're trying to figure out storage bins for your move or for just general storage. Width times depth times height, and usually the width and the depth are larger, and then the height is the big factor in a lot of things, because that will determine how many gallons can really lay in there and how much space you'll have in there. All right, take care. I will see you soon. Be blessed.